There is a time in every system's life where you think about what the flagship series for that system is. With the PlayStation Vita and PlayStation TV, that series is definitely the Hyperdimension Neptunia series. There are 2 full remakes on the Vita. There's another remake coming later this year. There are 3 spin-off titles out on it so far in the West, and 2 more potential spin-offs coming in the future within the next year or two. When you think about the PS Vita, one of the first franchises that should come to mind is the Neptunia franchise. With the series going forward, I have a new review for the newest game that's about to release later this month, a full remake of Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory. Here is my official review of Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 3. Unlike the differences between Rebirth 1 and Rebirth 2, Neptunia Rebirth 3 is a direct sequel to the events of Rebirth 2. 3 years after the defeat of the final boss of that game, there is peace in game industry, but a war is about to begin. As Neptune is forced out into the wilderness to be able to do work for her country, she is swept away to another dimension that takes place in the year 1989 when the country of Planeptune had just been founded. In this new world, she meets a CPU called Plutia, as well as a lot of familiar faces like Noir, Blanc, Vert, and others. Being stuck in this alternate dimension, she must then work on increasing shares so she can go back home, along with participating in the political war between the CPUs and a villain group called the Seven Sages. The story of Rebirth 3 is something that is very lighthearted and casual, just as you would expect out of a Hyperdimension Neptunia main series game. There is a lot of comedy, especially from Neptune, and there are a lot of very new references and parodies that they've thrown into the game, such as recent technology like the Oculus Rift, or even mentioning and parodying Rebirth 2's storyline as well. Rebirth 3 is a mix between a turn-based RPG and an action RPG, and uses the same gameplay system that the previous Rebirth games used. Since it does use the same system, the first thing we should go over are the improvements and additions they've made. First of all is Stella's Dungeon, which is by far the biggest improvement and change that they made in this game. Before, in Rebirth 2, Stella's Dungeon was a small mini-game you could do at any city to be able to gain materials to use in discs. In Rebirth 3, it is accessible from the customization menu anywhere you are, and not only can you get disc materials, but you can also get new plans, monster drops, equipment for Stella, and it is currently the only way you can get the items you need for the game's true ending. There are a lot of other minor adjustments in battle, like the SP system that's been changed, which I'll mention in just a moment, and other things. Now, the progression through the game is gone through story events and quests. This is a little different than the previous Rebirth games because there's a lot more emphasis on doing quests to unlock story events than just do story events over and over and over and over with dungeons. There will be sections of the game where you just be going through story events, but there will be parts where there won't be any story events available, and you'll have to do special story quests to get those to populate. Now, this system has pretty much been unchanged, as well as the battle system. You still have the same type of battles where you go and set up different angles and you have free roam around the battlefield during your turn. The main change to the battle system is the SP regeneration. SP, which is skill points, does not regenerate automatically when you exit a dungeon. The only ways to regenerate this is to fight with physical attacks, which is very tedious and can take a long time to refill your gauge, or by using items that regenerate this. Because of this, you can't just exit a dungeon and set up huge attacks, because the EXE gauge also takes away SP instead of just EXE gauges. So you have to have a lot more strategy when you're setting up for a tough boss fight. Now, speaking of boss fights, there is a difficulty in the game. If you notice, Rebirth 2 is a bit easier than Rebirth 1 was to play, and Rebirth 3 is a bit harder than Rebirth 2 was. It doesn't have a lot of huge difficulty spikes, but there are a lot of bosses, especially towards the end of the game, that will test your patience and test your strategy by a long margin. There are a few bosses where you will have to stop and grind and make sure that you always buy all the best equipment in the shops to be able to be prepared as best you can. All in all, the game has 3 different endings you can achieve: normal, good, and true. For the normal ending, you should be able to play through the game and get it in about 25 hours. Now, if you do all the story events to get all of the ending items, you should expect to spend about 30 hours to get the good ending, and probably about 35 or 40 hours to get the true ending. All in all, it's got a pretty good amount of content for for an RPG, even though it doesn't have nearly as many endings as Rebirth 2 does. After you beat the game, you also have New Game Plus. There isn't a whole lot of new features in New Game Plus. You do get some extra Coliseum fights with some Rebirth 2 bosses, but all in all, it's more or less just carrying all of your progress over to go through the game again, to either max out on things or to get a different ending. Now, as far as the presentation is concerned, there is a lot of improvement here. The Rebirth 1 and 2 games did have some pretty decent visuals, but the Rebirth 3 game does have improved visuals. If you zoom in on your characters, you can definitely see a lot of more detail and a lot more polish. Problems with the presentation come from the voice work and the frame rate drops in dungeons. First of all, the voice work is done well, but there are some scenes where the voice work is incomplete. This is especially apparent in the English dub of the game, where you will see a text box at the bottom of the screen, and the voice will only voice about 3/4 of the statements down in the box. I had many scenes where I was reading, and then the last few words of a dialogue sequence just wasn't there at all. And the other part is the frame rate drops. There are still some dungeons where the frames drop. Most of the game has a lot smoother gameplay, but in specific dungeons and in specific boss fights, there are some significant points of frame rate drops and lag. It doesn't hindrance you on setting up your attacks since this is a turn-based RPG, but it is definitely noticeable. Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 3 is a faithful remake of Neptunia Victory and improves on a lot of things from the previous Rebirth games. On the downside, some of the voice work is incomplete, and there are still sections where there are frame drops in the dungeons. Past this is a very cute and colorful RPG that'll make you laugh but will also challenge your mind. PlayStation Vita Reviews rates Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 3 V Generation an 8 out of 10. If you have any questions and comments, leave them in the section below, or visit our site and forum at forum.vitareviews.net or vitareviews.net.